Today's tech news moves fast, but understanding it shouldn't be hard. That's why Snarful Solutions Group brings you Connecting the Dots, where we break down what's happening in tech and why it matters to you. Now, let's dive in with your hosts.
We spend so much time talking about the cloud as if it's this pristine, weightless, almost invisible realm.
Right, like a completely frictionless digital utopia, just, floating somewhere above our heads, totally detached from the physical world.
Exactly. But if you pull back the curtain on the actual infrastructure running that digital utopia, you hate cold, hard reality really quickly.
Yeah, it is not weightless at all.
No, not even a little. It's thousands of tons of steel, immense slabs of concrete, and it is just devouring absolutely massive amounts of electricity and water.
It's kind of the ultimate paradox of the modern era, honestly. We're suddenly realizing that our limitless virtual world requires an aggressively physical, incredibly heavy footprint to actually exist.
It really does. Well, welcome to Connecting the Dots. I'm Alex.
And I'm Morgan.
Broadcasting from Snarful Solutions Group in Sacramento, California. And today is Monday, August 24, 2026.
Let's get you caught up on the day, right? Starting with your weather and markets.
Yeah, and speaking of heavy environmental footprints, the National Weather Map is looking incredibly active today. Across the U.S. right now, there are 232 active weather alerts.
Wow.
Yeah, and 118 of those are sitting over land.
That is just a staggering amount of atmospheric energy moving across the continent. So depending on where you're listening from, you'll definitely want to check weather.gov to see what kind of systems are moving through your specific zip code.
For sure. Fortunately, locally here in Sacramento, things are a bit more stable. We're looking at a beautiful, sunny 93 degrees with a nice, light 5 to 10 mile per hour breeze, just to, keep the heat manageable.
A classic late August Monday in Northern California.
Yeah, can't complain. So looking at the financial rundown for today, Monday, August 24, the markets are showing some interesting friction.
How so?
Well, the Dow Jones managed to climb, closing up at 53,419.98. So that's a gain of 0.30%. But meanwhile, the S&P 500 dipped slightly, closing at 7,647.28, which is down 0.21%. And over in the crypto space, Bitcoin had a really strong day, closing at 78,319.08, up 0.76%.
Interesting. You can really see traditional equities trying to find their footing to start the week, while decentralized assets are seeing a pretty clear influx of capital today.
Definitely. And a quick look at Sunday's MLB action to wrap up the weekend. The SF Giants lost a close one-run game to the Boston Red Sox, 4-5. Jake Bennett took the win on the mound for that one.
Oh, tough break for the Giants.
Yeah, and the Athletics won a tight matchup against the Houston Astros, 7-6. Jack Perkins was the winning pitcher there.
Man, those one-run differentials always indicate grueling, high-leverage innings for the bullpens.
They really do. You have to maintain absolute focus to close out those tight games. And speaking of maintaining focus, today's episode is brought to you by Strong Coffee, the premium instant coffee that tastes like a traditional brew, but is packed with 15 grams of protein, NCTs, and adaptogens like ashwagandha. Get clean, sustained energy without the jitters. Use promo code SNARFUL for 20% off at strongcoffeecompany.com.
All right, let's dive into the day's sources.
Yes, let's unpack this, because our first story takes that whole concept of massive energy consumption and brings it right to our front doors.
Literally.
Yeah. We need to look closely at the physical collision happening right now between the AI boom and local communities.
And I think the scale of what is being built right now is it's difficult to comprehend. We aren't just talking about a few new server farms out in the desert.
Not at all. Right now, there are over 4,000 AI data centers actively operating across the United States, and there are more than 3,000 additional facilities that are either proposed or already breaking ground.
That's a massive footprint.
It is. But to really understand why this is causing such a huge uproar, we have to look at the mechanics. Why do these specific AI facilities require so much more physical infrastructure than the traditional cloud data centers we've been building for, the last 20 years.
Right. So it comes down to a fundamental shift in how computation actually works. The traditional cloud was mostly about storage and basic retrieval, which utilizes standard CPUs.
Just fetching files, basically.
Exactly. But when you ask an AI model to write a brief or generate an image, it isn't just fetching a file. It is actively calculating probabilities across billions of parameters in real time.
Wow.
Yeah. And that requires clusters of specialized GPU's graphics processing units running parallel processing at maximum capacity.
And the byproduct of all that localized, intense computation is heat.
An unbelievable amount of heat. You can't just cool these new GPU racks with heavy air conditioning like the old server farms. They require advanced liquid cooling systems.
So you have tech companies building these massive warehouses that are pulling hundreds of megawatts of electricity off the local grid to run the processors.
Yeah, and simultaneously siphoning millions of gallons of municipal water just to keep the silicon from literally melting.
Which brings us to the collateral damage. Local communities are waking up to find their infrastructure pushed to the brink. Residential utility rates are spiking because the grid has to be upgraded to handle the load.
Right, they're paying for it.
Exactly. And the ultimate slap in the face for these towns is that once the massive construction phase ends, an AI data center brings almost zero permanent jobs to the area.
Yeah, you just need, a few security guards and maintenance technicians to watch the blinking lights?
Basically. I look at this and it reminds me of a giant, incredibly thirsty factory moving into a quiet residential neighborhood without asking permission, and then they just leave the locals to figure out how to pay the suddenly massive neighborhood water and power bills.
That is a perfect analogy. If we look at the historical precedent, this feels a lot like the early days of the railroad or the interstate highway system.
Oh, yeah.
You had this massive, disruptive, highly physical infrastructure that had to be violently laid down over existing quiet towns to enable a new era of commerce. The towns bore the physical burden so the broader economy could accelerate.
Only this time, the towns are actively fighting back. The source material highlights a recent Gallup poll showing that 71% of Americans now oppose data centers being built in their communities. 71%.
That is huge.
It is. Compare that to nuclear power. Only 53% of Americans oppose nuclear power plants.
That is just a staggering metric. People are literally looking at the data and deciding they would rather have a specialized nuclear fission reactor built down the street than host a warehouse full of AI servers.
And when you look at it mechanically, you kind of can't blame them. I mean, the AI center drains your aquifer, jacks up your power bill, provides no local employment, and sends all the profits back to Silicon Valley.
Yeah, it's taxation on the local infrastructure without any localized representation or reward.
Completely. And that level of fierce community frustration doesn't stay local for long. It is rapidly morphing into a massive political liability, especially with the midterms approaching.
Without a doubt.
It really is. Now, before we get into this next part, I want to be super clear for you, the listener. We are impartially reporting on the political stances of both sides here. We are not taking any sides ourselves. We are simply conveying the viewpoints expressed in the source material.
Absolutely. We're just the messengers here.
Right. So looking at the political strategies, you start to see this fascinating, almost panicked fracture in how both parties are handling this infrastructure boom. Let's look at Donald Trump's stance first. He has come out strongly defending the data center build-out.
Yes, and his core argument is rooted entirely in national security and global economic dominance.
Right.
The premise is that if the United States slows down its physical AI infrastructure to appease local zoning boards or, worry about municipal water rights, China will simply overtake us in AI development.
Yeah, he went so far as to say that communities opposing these centers are making a mistake because of the tremendous tax revenue they supposedly bring.
Which is heavily debated, of course.
Right. And his mechanical solution to the power grid problem is actually to let AI companies build their own independent power plants off the grid, which he described as, quote, tired.
I mean, the logistics of letting private tech monopolies build their own unregulated power plants to bypass local utilities is a regulatory labyrinth.
Total nightmare.
But it highlights how desperate the push is to keep the computation running at all costs. However, you are seeing massive pushback on that exact philosophy from within his own party.
Yeah, look at Texas Governor Greg Abbott. Texas is historically the epicenter of deregulation and pro-business expansion. Yet Abbott recently halted 1,800 proposed data center projects in his state.
1,800, that's a lot of stalled concrete.
Huge amount. He publicly stated that the tech companies dug their own grave by failing to gain local support first.
Yeah, Abbott is instituting very strict, localized guardrails. He is legally mandating that data centers cannot take water or power if it threatens the supply needed by local residents.
That makes sense.
And furthermore, he's suggesting they actually have to prove they can lower electricity costs for everyday consumers if they want the privilege of operating in Texas.
And this isn't just a Republican state issue either. Democratic governors in New York and Pennsylvania are imposing almost identical restrictions.
Right. There's this rare, completely bipartisan agreement at the state level that the tech giants have overplayed their hand.
Which is trickling up to Washington and causing outright election anxiety. We saw that in the leaked memo from the National Republican Senatorial Committee regarding the Ohio Senate race.
That memo was very revealing.
Very. So GOP Senator John Husted, who has historically championed these data centers to bring tech into Ohio, is currently trailing Democrat Sherrod Brown by 8 points.
Wow.
The memo explicitly states that Brown has turned Husted's support of data centers into his de facto opponent. Brown is spending millions running ads framing Husted as the politician letting big tech drain Ohio's natural resources.
The broader fear outlined in that NRSC memo is palpable. If Husted loses a Senate seat over this, the political calculus changes overnight. AI data centers will be deemed politically toxic nationwide.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Lawmakers won't touch a zoning permit with a 10-foot pole if they believe it will cost them their election.
Exactly. But while Ohio and Texas put up walls, other states are quietly opening the back door.
Oh, yeah. Look at what just happened in Louisiana with the so-called Lightning Amendment. State lawmakers actually signed non-disclosure agreements with tech lobbyists, NDAs, and granted massive, unprecedented tax breaks. They are allowing Meta to build a $10 billion data center, but the state is legally permitting Meta to only cover 50% of its own power generation costs for the next 15 years.
Keeping in mind that this single Meta facility is projected to consume twice the power of the entire city of New Orleans on a hot summer day.
It's insane. So if a multi-billion-dollar tech giant is only paying for half of the massive power plant needed to run their facility, who pays for the other half?
The everyday ratepayers in Louisiana.
Right. The cost gets quietly baked into the residential utility bills. But taking a step back from the politics for a second, I want to look at the actual technological longevity of all this concrete and steel.
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Are these states sacrificing their grids for infrastructure that is actually future-proof?
Well, based on the analysis from tech entrepreneur Jay Valentine in our stack, absolutely not. Valentine argues that the whole concept of the centralized, massive server farm is already nearing the end of its life cycle.
Wait, really?
Yeah. He points out that the future of AI is rapidly shifting toward distributed computing and quantum processing.
Okay, yes. The underlying mechanism of distributed computing, or edge computing, changes the geography of AI completely.
How so?
Right now, when you prompt an AI, the data travels to a centralized warehouse, gets processed, and comes back. But edge computing means the processing happens locally, right on the neural engine of your smartphone, your laptop, or your smart vehicle.
Ah, okay.
The heavy lifting is distributed across millions of small devices rather than consolidated in one massive warehouse.
And quantum computing would process complex data exponentially faster without needing 1 million square feet of server racks. So if Valentine's projection holds true, the processing power moves to the edge and these massive data centers become technologically obsolete. I mean, we are basically watching states drain their aquifers and jack up their residential utility rates to build the equivalent of empty 1990s shopping malls.
The dead mall analogy is painfully accurate. Think about it. 30 years ago, those massive concrete structures were the undisputed center of the retail universe.
They were everywhere.
Today, they're just stranded, rotting assets dotting the suburbs. If the computing paradigm shifts to the edge, the tech giants will simply write off the losses on these warehouses and move on to the next technology.
But the local town will be stuck holding the bag, left with a massive concrete shell and a depleted power grid.
It's a brutal collision between the speed of software and the permanence of hardware.
It really is. But let's look closer at another type of collateral damage caused by the tech industry. Because while the U.S. is battling over the physical infrastructure of the internet, governments overseas are aggressively targeting the software side.
A totally different approach.
Yeah, they are shifting the focus from the physical toll on the power grid to the psychological toll on families.
It's a pivot from regulating the servers to regulating the algorithms. And the legislation we are seeing proposed now is far more aggressive than anything we've seen in the past decade.
We're looking specifically at New Zealand. Prime Minister Christopher Luxon has introduced a sweeping new bill that would completely ban children under 16 from using social media platforms.
Total ban.
A hard ban. on Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, Facebook, any platform reliant on algorithmic feeds.
Historically, governments have treated digital spaces with a, user beware approach.
Right.
Leaning heavily on parental controls and optional content filters.
Right. Putting it on the parents.
Exactly. This proposed legislation in New Zealand represents the state stepping in and treating social media the same way it regulates access to tobacco or alcohol for minors.
And the research driving this mandate is pretty alarming. According to the data behind the bill, 1 in 3 New Zealand teenagers is currently spending a minimum of 5 hours a day on social media.
5 hours a day.
Yeah. Prime Minister Luxon is not mincing words here either. He is publicly calling this, quote, harm being done to a generation. The platforms are directly tied to skyrocketing anxiety, sleep deprivation, and plummeting educational outcomes.
Well, because the underlying mechanisms of these platforms are fundamentally designed to capture and hold attention. They utilize dopamine-driven feedback loops and infinite scrolling architecture.
Yeah, they want you hooked.
Yeah. So from a public health perspective, the New Zealand government has concluded that a developing adolescent brain simply cannot defend itself against a billion-dollar algorithm optimized for addiction.
But passing a ban and actually enforcing a ban are two entirely different things in the digital age,
That is the big catch.
Yeah. The tricky part here is the enforcement mechanism. How do you technically prevent a determined 15-year-old from downloading an app?
It's nearly impossible.
Right. So the bill strategy is to completely bypass the kids and the parents and aim directly at the tech companies' wallets. If a platform fails to rigorously verify the age of its users, the tech firm can be fined up to 10% of its global revenue.
10% of global revenue for a conglomerate like Meta or ByteDance is an astronomical existential threat.
It's massive.
It forces the platforms to take the legislation seriously rather than just treating small fines as the cost of doing business.
Exactly. Now, to avoid that fine, the legislation suggests platforms will have to mandate rigorous age verification tools, specifically citing facial age estimation software or government-backed digital IDs.
Wow. Okay, that's heavy.
Right. Now, it is worth noting the bill does have carve-outs. Pure messaging apps like WhatsApp are excluded. Gaming environments like Roblox are safe, and utility AI tools like ChatGPT are exempt.
That distinction is crucial. They are attempting to thread the needle by not banning the internet itself or digital communication as a whole. They are surgically targeting the endless scroll, algorithmic social feeds that are driving the behavioral health crisis.
But this approach is drawing massive pushback, even from within Luxon's own ruling coalition. The ACT and NZ First Parties are vehemently opposed to this framework.
And why is that?
Well, their primary argument requires just looking right across the Tasman Sea at Australia. Australia recently passed a similar world-first ban, and critics are already labeling it a colossal failure.
Because teenagers are exceptionally tech-savvy. The moment the Australian government erected a digital wall, teenagers simply routed around it using virtual private networks, offshore proxy servers, and fake ID generators.
Yep, they just bypassed it entirely.
The Australian experiment is proving that declaring a platform illegal doesn't magically rewrite the technical architecture of the internet.
But this raises a much larger, more concerning paradox. And I really want you, the listener, to think about the mechanics of this.
Okay.
If the only way a platform can legally avoid a massive fine is to accurately verify age using biometric facial recognition or a state-issued digital ID, how do they accomplish that without creating an absolute privacy nightmare for every single adult user?
Oh, wow.
Right. To prove I am over 16, do I now have to submit a biometric scan of my face to Mark Zuckerberg's servers just to look at Instagram?
That is the exact paradox privacy advocates are sounding the alarm over. You cannot selectively identify only the children. By definition, to separate the minors from the adults, you have to mandate identification for everyone.
Yes.
You are effectively forcing every adult on the internet to hand over highly sensitive biometric data or government identification to private tech monopolies that already have abysmal track records regarding data security.
You're forcing the creation of a massive centralized honeypot of biometric data. I mean, the collateral damage of trying to protect a teenager's mental health might literally be the total eradication of digital anonymity and privacy for the entire adult population.
It's a staggering trade-off.
It really is.
It is the ultimate collision of good intentions, highly addictive technology, and the absolute technical limits of government regulation.
Before we wrap up, a quick thanks to Old Glory, an iconic music and sports fan merch store, perfect for the techie in your life. Use promo code SNARFL for 15% off at oldglory.com.
All right, let's tie these threads together because the overarching theme today is incredibly clear.
It really is. Whether we are talking about hardware or software, we are watching the tech industry collide with the physical and social realities of everyday life in unprecedented ways.
Yeah, on one side of the coin, you have the massive, heavy footprint of AI data centers threatening to drain local power grids, drinking up municipal water supplies.
And sparking fierce bipartisan political battles from the Texas State House to the Ohio Senate race.
Exactly. And then on the flip side of that same coin, you have sweeping, desperate attempts by governments, like we see in New Zealand, to regulate the software side.
Right. They're trying to tame addictive algorithms and protect the psychological well-being of an entire generation, even if the enforcement mechanisms require completely overhauling digital privacy for everyone.
It all comes back to that illusion of the weightless cloud. The digital world has finally hit the hard limits of the physical world.
It is testing the breaking point of our local power grids, and it is testing the psychological limits of our families.
The friction between the virtual and the real has never been more intense.
Which leaves us with a final thought to mull over as you go about your week. As governments worldwide scramble to lay down regulations, battling over both the physical warehouses of the tech boom and the digital algorithms those warehouses generate, who is ultimately going to bear the cost of all this friction?
Good question.
Will the multi-billion-dollar tech giants be forced to adapt, or is it going to be everyday families left footing the bill through higher utility rates and sacrificed digital privacy?
History suggests that when massive infrastructure shifts occur, the everyday families are usually the ones left paying the toll.
We're here to help at Snarful, so reach out on our website if you have any more questions.
That's a wrap on today's top stories. Remember, tech doesn't have to be complicated, and we're here to help connect the dots. If you've got questions or want to learn more, visit us at snarful.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.